Joining us this morning is Philippe Le Corre. He's Senior Fellow at the Center for China Analysis at the Asia Society Policy Institute. Philippe, thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning. I want to start by asking you about what Xi Jinping projected. He, rejected protectionism and carried the banner, if you like, of globalization in Peru. Joe Biden, meantime, tried to strengthen alliances and assure allies in his final weeks. Can I ask you who you think had a better summit? Was it Xi, or was it Biden, or maybe it was Trump, who wasn't there but was literally everywhere as well?
Well, yes. I mean, Joe Biden is obviously ending his presidency. This is the lame duck period, as you know, which has started after the election of Donald Trump a few days ago. Now, obviously, this meeting was planned a long time ago between the outgoing president and the Chinese leader, Xi Jinping. So the expectations were rather low in the sense that, what can a lame duck president really achieve when we don't really know what the next policy will be like? And surely Donald Trump will have a lot of surprises for us and for Beijing in particular. So to answer your question, I think Xi Jinping was very straightforward in his comments, in his questions. He was very harsh in some ways. He wanted to make things clear about what China thinks, the relationship should be like. He was also sending messages to Donald Trump rather than to Joe Biden.
Yeah, talk to us about the message. What do you think he was trying to say to Trump?
So he was trying to say that perhaps the US should stop export controls, or at least limit them, and perhaps let China develop itself the way it wants. I mean, this is one of the four red lines that he's given. One being Taiwan, the second one being democracy and human rights, the third one being the development path, and the third being development rights. So, of course, I won't go into details. I'm sure you've covered all this already. And these concepts are quite vague, except for the Taiwan one, which is quite well known. But this is the first time the Chinese leader has been so clear, so detailed about what he doesn't like about this bilateral relationship. And I think the American side, in a way, had rather low expectations, considering the domestic political context in the U.S. But on the drug issues, fentanyl, and on climate change, there was some results. And at least, even though you may recall that President Biden never visited China and will not visit China as US president. He did as vice president a long time ago. This is quite strange that these two leaders, who know each other quite well, were not able to actually have a normal bilateral meeting in China. So it's a mixed bag, really, for both of them. But I would say that Xi came up with very harsh messages and straightforward again. And I think, he wants to show Donald Trump that, the relationship has to come on China's terms in many ways. So we'll see what happens. I mean, obviously, Trump has been very low key so far on what he wants to do with China.
Exactly, and that's the question I have for you. We know Joe Biden sort of had, he was familiar with all the issues, the red lines, and he had a sort of a guardrails approach to it. Do we have a sense of what Donald Trump's approach to all these so-called red lines might be in the months ahead?
It's, I've been talking to a lot of people on both sides in the US, and I think it's difficult at the moment. I mean, obviously, you have to look at the appointments of the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, and of the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. The latter will need to be confirmed by the US Senate, which is now Republican dominated. At least, will be from January. So these people have had very critical comments on China over the past few years. And remember that the Biden administration is actually recommending to his successor to carry on with export controls and a number of things that the Chinese president just condemned during this bilateral meeting. So I think Trump, he's really is a real fan of tariffs, and the trade war will probably somewhat come back. With whether it's successful or not, it's hard to tell. I mean, the last time it was not. But I think China is expecting more and more tariffs and trade provisions to prevent China to export certain things and to prevent US companies to export high-tech products to China.
So as the U.S. increasingly turns inward, is preparing for a potential return of the protectionist Trump's presidency seems to be sort of marketing China as a champion of economic globalization, the new leader. Are you seeing signs that the Beijing strategy to counter protectionism, reframe the global order working, or will the U.S. and its allies push back?
I remember President Xi's visit to Davos in 2017. That's about 8 years ago when he made that speech. And I myself was visiting China and had meetings with Chinese officials and scholars who were all telling me that China was going to be the gatekeeper of globalization. Now, is it really the case that the Chinese market is so open, and is it really a free market as it claims? I mean, the United States and also many countries around the world, I'm thinking of Europe, where I'm presently sitting, do not seem to believe this, which is why they've launched these so-called de-risking policies. And, in the US, people talk about decoupling. I don't think it's going to be so easy for China to come as an alternative to the US. But what I find really striking about Xi Jinping's words and attitude in this meeting is that he really wants to assert China as a great power. And he wants the United States, whoever is in power, to acknowledge that China is no longer, a developing power, but it is a superpower, a great nation. He said the Thucydides trap is not necessarily going to happen. He said that people have to be responsible, countries have to be responsible, and he's basically setting the situation with two superpowers looking at each other, and the rest is really in between, and it's almost secondary.
Right, understood. I have a question for you, Philippe, about the summit proper, because we know there were several new leaders who attended, including those from Indonesia, Mexico, Vietnam, Japan. Was there unity in what the bloc will be with the return of Trump 2.0? I mean, we are hearing the AP, the Associated Press, already talking about the Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, having difficulty arranging a meeting with Trump to talk about Japan, the Japan-US alliance, and that sort of thing.
Yes, I mean, obviously, all these countries, many of these countries you've mentioned, including Japan, do have their own domestic, political difficulties. And Prime Minister Ishiba is certainly not as powerful as the former Prime Minister Abe, who was Trump's counterpart at the time when Trump was the elected president the first time. And you remember that Shinzo Abe was actually handling Trump fairly well at the time. At least he was considered as being rather successful. This time, we have leaders such as, the Korean president I see on my screen now, or the Japanese prime minister and others who are not really in a position to put much pressure on a Donald Trump who is coming back with a vast majority in the Congress, and he's going to have the White House as well. He's got the Supreme Court. He's got all kinds of powers, and the appointments. I mean, I think that one of the key issues that have been discussed over the past few days has been, some of the appointments he's made, and obviously not all of these cabinet members will be confirmed. That's for sure. Rubio might be confirmed because he's a senator for a start, but many of the other people that Trump has nominated may not make it in the end, or at least some of them will not, I assume. So this is why, the uncertainty among Asian leaders and APEC leaders, some of them are from Latin America, and as you know, China is also a major investor in Latin America, reflects this kind of concern about what the Trump presidency will be like. And this is also happening in Europe, in the Middle East, and many other parts of the world, I'm afraid.
All right, Philippe, thank you very much. We have to leave it there for now. It was Philippe Le Corre, Senior Fellow on Foreign Policy at the Asia Society. Thank you once again, sir, for talking to us from Paris.